Okay. James is getting another chair. I want to know, hello, my name is Caroline Colas, and I'm the Health and Wellness Director at the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan. And it is a delight to have you guys here for what I'm calling our pre-game show before our movie. And we're going to have actually a Q&A with the director and a fellow, right? Yes. At the end of the film, but this is a conversation that we were having kind of backstage about dementia, brain health, changing perspectives, narratives that we tell ourselves that impact the outcome of an illness or diagnosis, and how the brain, not only the organ itself, but how our perception can impact our health, right? And our relationships. And that there's hope, right? That maybe when we get this diagnosis, I work a lot in the cancer care space and in the Parkinson's space, and in adults, with adults of all ages. And what I find in my work is that when somebody gets a diagnosis, especially if it's a neurodegenerative disease or illness or diagnosis, there's come on in. Just don't even worry about being quiet. This is kind of a fireside chat. There's a fear and there's a loss that has to be dealt with, as well as the illness. Do you know what I'm talking about? So that's what we're going to talk about. But first, let me introduce you a little bit to our panel. Just go ahead and one at a time, give that quick round robin.
Hi, I'm Heather Campbell. I'm the CEO of Ready, Set, Recover. We are an online program that helps people get ready for and recover from surgery in a better way. When you hear the words, "you have to have surgery," that's when surgery starts. We create an online framework that gives you purpose, motivation, and actions so that you can go from being a patient sitting back to a participant who has ownership and the ability to change outcomes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jonah Udall. I am a nutritionist, herbalist, and researcher. I see private clients as a nutritionist and herbalist in Midtown and come out into the community like this.
Hi, I'm Diana. I'm a chef, I'm a health coach and an author, and I'm a diabetic. And I work with people that are not only diabetic, but I help teach people how to get out of the fear and confusion and get into the clarity and balance.
My name's Alex. I'm the supervisor of occupational therapy at ProHealth PT/OT. I work with adults and older adults with neurodegenerative conditions on keeping their ability to do the things they need to do every day, being confident doing it.
My name is James Nussbaum. I'm a physical therapist, and I'm the clinical and research director of ProHealth. And we really try to focus on helping people be independent and improve quality of life, regardless of what might be going on. And one of the most important things, and I think that's relevant to today's discussion, is assessing people periodically for things like brain health and cognition and balance and some other things that are really important, even without an injury or a known disease, just to kind of take your temperature at a certain period of time.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming in today and joining us for this screening and for the conversation. My name is Magda Kaczmarska. I am an Atlantic Fellow for Equity and Brain Health at the Global Brain Health Institute, which is a mouthful, and you'll learn about what that is when you watch the film. I'm also a dancer, a researcher, and an educator in brain health. And I'm excited to engage in a conversation with you about these topics.
And my name is Cynthia Stone, and I'm the director and producer of the film you're going to see today. And I'm so honored to be here and to have the film screened here. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
So we've got a lot of people that we could have a conversation with each one of them, and it would be quite a long one, right? So I want to talk to you guys. Anybody have any questions for any of these people now that you know kind of who they are? Can we start with that? Yes.
Yes. Regarding those wonderful people, do we have information about the names and their affiliations?
I can send that to you, actually.
Okay, that would be great.
That's an easy one. So let's go into narrative and medical narrative and what the stories that we tell ourselves. Your film, Cynthia, is a story. And can you tell us a little bit, well, we're going to do that at the end of the film, but what attracted you to this idea of the brain as a storytelling machine? Yeah?
Yeah, well, the brain is so complex, right? It's an amazing thing that we all have. And the Global Brain Health Institute approached me to do the documentary. I work a lot with mini documentaries at KQED in San Francisco, which is the public television station there. And they had done a reader's theater at UCSF as part of the Global Brain Health Institute, where they took oral histories of people from all walks of life who had dementia, who were caring for those with dementia with loved ones, doctors, scientists, and they created a beautiful book called Hearsay, and they created also a performance. And after the performance, they said, wow, those were such powerful stories. We need to make a film. And so they contacted me. And I just love that idea of kind of really capturing the complexity of this experience, this human experience that so many people go through. And to somehow show the two sides of it, how just heartbreaking it is when people go through this, but also those moments of surprise, those moments of connection, changing the way we look at the experience. So all of that complexity and kind of messiness and richness of the human experience really interested me in.
I love that you said messiness. It really is messy. And yet some part of our brain, and maybe Magda, you could talk about this, expects things to be linear, right? And yet, have you experienced this? Life does not seem to be very linear, right? Why is that? Like, what's going on that we have this expectation that it's going to be like this, and then the reality is that it's not. And then a diagnosis like dementia where somebody is still there, right? Who they are, the essence of who they are is still there, but we're not able to reach them in traditional ways is a surprise to us in some ways.
It sounds still, okay, wonderful. That's an excellent question. That illusion of linearity, it's an invention. And one of the things that I learned in meeting with, so the Global Brain Health Institute brings together researchers, clinicians, and artists like myself to understand and tackle some of these issues around brain health and dementia, and making sure that around the globe, all people have access. We all have brains. We should all have access to education about our brains and resources to do them. So one of the things I've learned from the neurologists is that the part of our brain that actually supports our linear thinking is the last part of our brain to develop. And a lot of us, I think of the brain, myself included, as this blob, this homogeneous blob. But in fact, it's lots of different parts of the brain are responsible for different parts of our function. But most importantly, I think my work, which was one of the questions you brought in, focuses on the embodiment part. And dementia, and as a neurodegenerative condition, affects how our brain, or changes our brain. But the way that we can connect through gesture, through movement, through embodiment remains, regardless of the type of dementia and the changes that are happening in the brain. And I think that's something that you'll see very strongly in the film.
And that's an interesting thing that you're saying, which is about sort of like our physical way that we are in the world, our physical being. That part of our brain really is a way as an access point. And James, I wondered if you could talk about that, if that's one of the, did I steal your microphone? If that's one of the reasons that you're so fascinated or were with physical therapy, right? And movement and getting people moving again, just on a personal note.
So I think that that's an unbelievably important sort of subtopic of what we're talking about here today, and whether it's to be able to connect with, communicate with, gain access into, and receive back communication with someone that has dementia or even some other sort of neurodegenerative condition, sometimes it's a way that we can help and improve their quality of life, even if we're not getting what we perceive, or at least what our initial thought on what we're trying to get out. Oh, we want to ask questions, see how they're doing, or we want to assess something that's a little bit about us, not as much always about them. And through touch, through movement, and through a lot of other things, very often we can find something that's enjoyable for someone and that makes them feel alive and participatory, that if we didn't try these things, I don't think we would know.
Alex, do you want to add into that about, are you an OT? Yeah, so that feels very much exactly like what James is talking about, which is, okay, maybe this specific exercise isn't what they need to do, but how can I reach them? How can I connect to them? And, really, what struck me about the film, Cynthia, was like how powerful listening is.
Yeah, we talk a lot about the therapeutic use of self in OT, like how your presence and your listening and just being there with the person, talking to them, hearing their story, being in their reality is a very therapeutic experience. It can bring comfort. It can bring, like, you can see them do better in whatever they're doing, feeling a little more confident and comfortable doing what they have to do. And OT is very functional. We want people to do the things they want to do, that they need to do, that they're expected to do, as safe and confident and comfortable as they can. So in this realm, that's the things that we really address.
And Diana, I wonder if you could pop in there. It also feels to me like your work is about, how do I stay centered and grounded myself? Because there's the caregiver that is a part of this story, right? There's the caregiver or even the team. It's like you put the person that has the diagnosis in the center, let's say, of the wheel, and then everybody else that's impacted by that is part of the team. So staying centered, staying aware, which is a lot of what you do, is crucial. It almost feels like to me how I am. I heard Jill Bolte Taylor, who wrote My Stroke of Insight, talk about this. She could tell when she had a stroke, came into the room. She could feel their energy. She lost access of her left side of her brain, but she had access completely to her right. And if somebody was upset, right, it impacted her. And so, yeah, tell
I love that you brought that up. I recently took care of my father, and I've had a lot of conversations with people who are caretakers. And I believe on both sides, on the actual caretaker themselves, they have to pay attention to how they are and how they're checking in. And are they applying self-care every week?
Yeah.
And the people on the other side that they're caring for will feel that when they're off.
Yeah. And Jonah, you didn't mention that you're also a dancer and a musician, right? But you are, and a researcher. He helps with research in the microbiome. I just wonder if we could go to that listening. Like, musicians listen a lot. Dancers listen and play with silence in a different way. With movement, by stillness and then moving. How has that impacted your decision to work in this field? I know people with Parkinson's, but with other people who have neurodegenerative challenges.
Yeah, I think one of the great tragedies of the way that modern medicine takes shape presently is in divorcing ourselves from our bodies and from listening to our bodies. I think that is something most of us need to relearn. Babies are born listening to their bodies, and we are told throughout our lives, you might, be inclined towards this or want to do this or feel like this, but no, you can't, and no, you can't, and no, you can't, or you should do this instead, and you should do this instead. And some of that from a nutritional perspective, as a nutritionist, is quite legitimate. We have these sweet flavors that our mind wants because of certain programming, and yet we're sort of being lied to by our food. And so there's instances in which we do have to distrust that. But our overall medical paradigm often, and obviously, I mean, I think work like PT and OT is like the exact counter to this that is so vital and necessary, but that we don't listen to our bodies enough, and just to take time to listen to the body, for one, and then space, and because what the body has to say is often a lot more complicated and messy and right-brained, and all than we would hope.
We're going back to the messiness, right? Can you feel that? That it is, and it is that reality. And Heather, I was wondering if you could talk about this idea of listening and the narrative. We're talking to ourselves all the time, right? Our brain is talking to ourselves. Does anybody else feel like that? Yeah. Right? Like, can I ever turn it off? Right? And of course, the answer is no. It's not designed that way. Even if you meditate, they say to you, it's not about turning your brain off. It's about turning maybe the volume down and turning the volume up on something else. You turn the volume up on writing your own story and your own narrative when you receive a diagnosis. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Within our program, come in. You're not interrupting?
Oh, you're just doing
looking,
it. Okay, sorry.
Within our program, we have 24 days of action steps. One of the first action steps we have you do is write the story of your surgery. When you're having surgery, you tell people. You might be telling them for logistical reasons, I've got to not be at work, I'm having surgery. You might tell them because you care about them, they care about you, you want to share. But you are telling that story over and over and over again. I started the program because I needed it. I went in to see a surgeon, and he said, I have good news and great news. Good news is you came for a reason that is fine. The great news is you've got something really wrong with your finger. And if you didn't come, it would be bad, but you're here, so we'll fix it. I'm like, okay, great. I could have said, I just went to a hand surgeon for something wrong. It's a bone-eating lesion that's eaten a third of my finger. It could be cancer. Both of those stories are completely true. I could have chosen either one of those things because both of those things happened. I don't want to hear the second version, the 1,000 times that I'm going to be telling this story. I don't want to hear that. And I don't want you to respond to me from that story. I tell you that second story, you say, oh my God, that's awful. And now I hear you saying, oh my God, it's awful. It's awful. Cortisol pumping through. I don't want that. So absolutely, the stories we tell ourselves are the stories we hear. That's what enters our body. You want to be truthful. You don't want to lie to yourself because your body will know that as well. But can you tell the story in a way that helps you rather than hurts you? It's your story. Make yourself a superhero. What about it? What about it do you like? Someone actually asked me as I was telling this today, what did you have and what was it? I don't know. I have no idea. The doctor told me the name. I immediately let go of it because it was a scary name. He said it's a conundrum why it happens. We don't know why this happens. It was my conundrum. That's what I called it. My mom wanted the name. She wanted to look it up. Like, you don't get to. That won't help me. It's a conundrum.
I want to go, Cynthia, back to choice and back to the stories that you heard and that you filmed, because this is really an important aspect of the story and of our health and of our outcome. And if I can have you share that during the film, you said your mom was diagnosed, right?
Yes, she didn't get an actual diagnosis, but I was filming in Brazil. Before I left, she'd had a diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment, but extremely high functioning. My mother's just, excuse the language, but my kids called her their kick-ass grandma. I mean, she's just very...
You can say ass here.
Very just bright and funny and just a vibrant person. And so I went off to film, and I was near the end of the filming, and I was in Brazil, and my husband called and said, hey, Rose's mom she's forgetting to eat, she just can't remember to eat. And so I came home, and she started having a series of strokes, and then she couldn't, in the last 3 months, understand, she didn't know who I was. But we did have these beautiful moments where we would be, lying in bed together, and we'd be listening to, because she loved classical music, and we'd be listening to music, and then I would read to her, and she would turn to me and say, "Who are you again?" And it was just kind of, I guess my point is that doing the film and meeting the people that you'll see in the film, if you stay for it, they really taught me how to be with her in the moment, to kind of let go of my label of the daughter and just be with her, kind of the essence of who she was. It was hard. It was heartbreaking at times and really difficult. But we did have some really beautiful moments together. And just this anthropologist in the film that you'll see, she, as an anthropologist whose mother also had dementia, she just, she learned that she should approach it like an anthropologist, where you don't go and impose your views on someone else, but you actually go to where they are. And so she's, don't try to haul the person back where you are, just go wherever they are. And that really helped me, just to be present with her in the moment and kind of let go of the fear and just kind of lean into it. And so it was hard, but it was also beautiful.
So choice, right? And if you could talk a little bit, Magda, about that. And that choice of letting go of the fear. Fear as a part of diagnosis, and what our brain does with that, and how it stimulates the amygdala, and how you were talking about the cortisol, Heather, and all of that coming into mind. Is there anything do you dance to get people out of that?
I actually want to bring that conversation back to you're talking about storytelling. I think when we think about the history of, for instance, how our relationships are to cancer or to heart health, we have shifted our societal narrative to normalize the fact that it's possible to live with a condition like that. But we don't really have the permission as a society to look at a neurodegenerative condition like dementia and say, oh, yes, I am living with dementia. Now, over the course of these last few years, I've had the privilege and the honor of meeting many people who are very fiercely living with dementia. And I've also seen people who have explored and discovered ways to help support people in living with dementia. And I think that's a very powerful thing. It's a way of it's giving people the choice to write their story. And part of why I love this film so much is because most of the films and the narratives that we hear about neurodegenerative conditions and brain health do not give us that choice. And we all deserve that. And they deserve that.
Yeah, beautiful. James, can you talk about that? You see patients all the time. And can you predict at all outcomes based on how they're approaching their situation? Do you know what I mean?
I'm not sure I know what you mean,
Well,
but...
I'll tell you, I work with a lot of neurologists in the Parkinson's space, and they have said to me that if someone has a particular mindset, they know that they're going to do better than somebody who doesn't, right? And so I just wonder about mindset, and if you see that as a factor in impacting outcome and even quality of life as we talk about choice.
Absolutely, and I was having a very nice yet interrupted conversation with Jonah before on some things in the healthcare realm that we totally understand why and how, and therefore we do them, and it's maybe more accepted than some of the things that we don't fully understand the why and the how. But just because we don't understand, or it's not 100% proven, as long as it's something that's not hurtful and it makes sense, it's something to do. So I can very, very comfortably say that being in a more positive environment and being more accepting and listening and not pushing one's objective onto someone else is incredibly helpful. And I do think that people that are more informed, whether it's a caregiver, a home health aide, a patient, there will ultimately be a better outcome. But if I can tangentially just really quickly say that part of that will also happen if we get the opportunity to impact that positivity on someone earlier on. And I haven't had the privilege of seeing the film yet, and it sounds like we're all gonna have a real, it'll take effect on us. But with most things in life, when it's the severe version, when it's that, when the person breaks the hip, when someone has that kind of surgery, whatever it is, that's when now we realize, it would have been great to have done something before. Let's take advantage and let's do something before and start that process of some of those things that we were just talking about, and I think we'll have better outcomes.
I think that's one of the messages on the film, too, is that, gosh, there's a lot we can do. We're with brain health right now where we were with cardiovascular health, 40 or 50 years ago. Would you agree? Where we're just saying, wait a second, lifestyle, come on in. Lifestyle impacts how we think, what we do, what we eat, what we say, what we repeat to ourselves, impacts our outcome. Alex, I wanted to ask you about, my father had a stroke, and I know that I'm always getting him to work out, right? And I work out with him 3 times a week, and it's a tricky balance for me because I want him to get back on the tennis court, right? And I loved what you said, Cynthia. Is that, and Magda, is that my wanting to pull them to where, or maybe James, you said, where I think he should be, or is it me going to where he is? And I think that's not a linear going back to the brain. I don't think that's a yes or no answer. I think it's a kind of an infinity circle, if you will. And you must experience that with caregivers all the time, Alex, right? Where they want this, but at the same time they want to listen, but am I pushing? But should I push?
Yeah, one of the hardest things I encounter in this area is when the goals of the patient don't align with the goals of the caregiver. And it happens a lot, especially my patients with Parkinson's. A lot of times they want to work on things like handwriting because they want to be able to write letters to their family or to sign their own signature on checks or to do the things that make them feel like they're doing what they need to do. And the caregiver is more focused on, I really want their legs to be strong or for them to sit up straighter or to be able to talk longer or do whatever they need to do. And it's a hard balance of pulling them into our reality versus letting them live in their reality and feeling good. One of the best trainings I ever did was this lady, Teepa Snow, I'm sure you've heard of her, yeah. I love her. She changed my perspective on how I treat every patient, even like my orthopedic patients or like hand therapy. People have their own reality. Like their goals are different. What they want to do is different than every other patient. You can't just apply the same broad stroke to everybody. You have to tailor it to them. And that's a hard conversation to have with caregivers and balancing it. But
an important one. Diana, it seems to me when you were blindsided by, the diabetes diagnosis in 2018, it feels like that's a condition where you really do have to listen kind of moment to moment to your body. And have you found that to be a struggle, or have you found that to be something that is a bit of a dance that you enjoy?
Well, I love to dance. I kind of connect with everything that I've just heard. And I loop it with fear and confusion of a diagnosis and the perception that other people have. And I will tell you, when I got diagnosed with type 1, people that I don't really know told me, oh, type 2 is the one you're fat, and type 2 is the one you die. And I thought, I'm going to die.
Wow.
And I thought,
wow,
the perception of what people see diabetic, and I'm kind of here to change that, is really quite eye-opening. And yet, for me, I could have bathed in that fear and confusion of, what do I do now? But I decided that it wouldn't have gone well And I began by going into the kitchen as a chef and beginning to really pay attention to my body and what my body needed, not what I thought I needed. And I created that magical word, wonder. Now, I could have gone down that rabbit hole. I've been there, kind of familiar, but it wouldn't help me. So I really think with people that I work with, it can be frightening for any kind of diagnosis, anyone. You don't know where to begin. But if you begin with the hope and the idea of wonder, what if I could shift it? What if it could be different? I think if you begin that way, it's a good way to begin.
Jonah, I wonder, you are really working in the Parkinson's space with nutrition. There's also the trajectory of when somebody's first diagnosed and living with them as they become less, the illness progresses. I don't think they become less, but capabilities might change. And I just wonder if you have, what your philosophy, I'm curious, is around that whole, seeing that in relationship to us talking about, wait a minute, let's go to where they are, or each person has their own unique perspective, So I don't know if I'm making sense. My question. Yes? Okay.
No, I think I want to take that and broaden it to also sort of piggyback off of what a lot of folks have been saying, to mention a little bit about belief. I think, the beliefs that we hold about what is possible, about what this diagnosis means, about, the beliefs as story, as faith, as hope, is really pivotal. And I think it's pivotal, and it is the pivotal thing at all those stages. And so what I'm really interested in as a clinician, whether someone has Parkinson's or any condition, is activating belief. The word placebo, most people associate with being sort of the fake treatment that someone might get in a trial in order to test whether the real treatment had a real effect. But what placebo really means, what placebo is belief. It's giving someone something, telling them that it works, and it not having a thing in it that has a medical reason why it works. And there's all sorts of amazing research now on placebo. Placebo has been this sort of like problem that the research world has tried to sort of get rid of. And it's like, well, actually, let's take a look at it head on. And so there's one study that I think encapsulates this better than anything else about this power of belief in our health. They did a study on hotel hospitality workers, 2 different hotels. There's kind of an epidemic of obesity and overweight in hospitality workers, despite it being a very physically active and demanding job. So they told one of the hotels, okay, it's really important to exercise. Here's all the benefits of exercise. You should really do it. They told the workers in the other hotel, hey, every day when you reach down under the bed and you mop here and brush here, you're getting exercise, and this is the muscle that you're exercising when you're doing this thing, and this is and those people lost weight, a ton of weight, got fitter. The other people, no change, not at all. Literally, okay? Placebo. It's not fake. What we believe, it's actually, and it's not that, we can believe anything away, right? They actually were doing physical labor. You can't say, I believe this is exercise sitting on the couch, right? This, but it's that actually being active participants in our own wellness, instead of just the recipients of whatever we're given, is totally vital part of healing and a vital part of wellness. And finding and activating, as a clinician, for me, finding and activating what are the person's beliefs, or even the capacity for belief at whatever stage they're at, that's where I'm going to try to meet them.
Beautiful. Heather, I wondered if you could talk about death is part of the cycle of living, right? And so when somebody is moving along or has this diagnosis, there's also, or even diagnosis for surgery, there's a potential risk that the outcome might be not favorable, but sometimes I don't feel like we embrace it as part of the cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. There's, again, back to that fear, back to that story, back to creating reality. It's looking at what framework can we be a part of. One of the things, Ready, Set, Recover is an online program. So, you're working on your computer. We're creating, though, a connection with your friends and family, and back to creating a framework where you get to drive some of these conversations. It is, again, back to the belief. What are we going to put out there? How do we have a comfortable conversation that you get to actually own? You get to raise your hand. It's a hope, actually, that I have within the medical world. We've got all of the people up here, I would say, are part of the revolution of healthcare. Truly, because we are looking at how do we change not only what are we doing, but how are we framing it up? That's critically important. And this conversation around reality and how I want to deal with that reality. It goes back to this conversation of meeting someone where they are. How do we acknowledge? And then maybe just take a breath. How do we look at it? And then maybe engage in a conversation. It's up to us to drive where we are. And so it's an ability and ownership to be able to do that.
And Cynthia, I want to go back to you. It's a bittersweet story, isn't it? It's a bittersweet story. We're talking about at the same time loss and then gaining whatever we can in those moments. So can you address that a little bit? Because that's part of the human condition too. Sometimes I feel like my father, I'll use my example, is more accepting of where he is and his ultimate end than I am.
Interesting, yeah. It is. It's that duality of heartbreak and beauty, really, and that's what we wanted to capture in the film. Again, I guess I'll use Dana Walrath, who you'll see, who's an artist and anthropologist. And she had a very contentious relationship with her mother growing up. And then through dementia, and it's not like this for everyone, but for them, through dementia, they were able to meet in the way they couldn't before she had dementia. And they became very close, and Dana cared for her, as she went through this process, and you'll see a lot of that in the film. But yeah, for her it was very sad and heartbreaking, but so beautiful also, and those two do exist together.
Yeah, they do. And I love and thank all of you for having this kind of conversation, and for you guys to also engage and listen to it as well. I think it really is at the cusp of what is it to be human, which is messy, especially when we're attempting to connect. And Magda, if you could close us out with whether it's dance, whether it's listening, whether it's story, whether it's meeting someone where they are. It's really about connecting both to ourselves and one another, and the brain is wired for it, right?
I think you've just hit the nail on the head. I think, and it's been resonant through all of the conversations we've had, is that the humanity of connection, it's essential and central to our identity, our personhood. And it helps us find meaning and purpose in our life. And I think one of the things I hope you'll see out of this film is different ways that people listen and make space for connection, and really, really connecting and meeting another person where they are. and what can happen when we do that. And I think that word hope and wonder, but especially that word hope, I think is what comes out of that space.
I want to thank our panelists and you. Please stay for the film where we're gonna give you a little bit of a break. You can go to the bathroom, come back, et cetera, et cetera. And thank you guys so much.